For 7 years, the Queen had spoken to ghosts. And tonight, the ghost walked in. With a human, stillness hung in the royal chamber like a shroud, broken only by the soft hum of a hologram flickering in the center of the room. It was an old recording, corrupted, broken, repeating the same phrase over and over with the finality of a dirge. Hull breach. Critical systems failing. This is Commander Talia signing off. Then static. Endless, suffocating static. Queen Lyria stood, motionless before the projection, silver robes trailing across the crystalline floor like spilled light. The scent of sterilized alloys clung to the air, sharp and metallic a smell that reminded her of battleship corridors, medical bays, and loss. Her slender hands trembled as they hovered near the console, though she would never allow the attendants outside the chamber to see it. Monarchs of Etoria did not tremble. They did not break. They endured. And yet for 7 years, she had endured nothing but silence. Beyond the sealed doors, the palace pulsed with life. The corridors hummed with diplomatic chaos as preparations. For the Unity Summit reached fever pitch. Species that had once faced each other across battle lines now exchanged brittle pleasantries under luminous arches. Every world, every envoy, every carefully crafted gesture balanced on the edge of ceremony and violence. All of it the grandeur, the urgency, was a theater. A fragile illusion of peace, while beneath it, old grudges simmered like volcanic fire. Lyria did not care. Her galaxy had narrowed to this one chamber, this one frozen moment in time where her daughter's voice refused to fade. Talia's last words haunted her like starlight, glimpsed through a storm, beautiful and unreachable. She had ordered search. Teams scoured wreckage fields, interrogated deserters. Nothing. The war ended, the trees were signed, and still there was no body to mourn. No closure. Only this. The Queen's gaze lifted as the hologram flickered again. Her throat tightened, the old pain rising like a tidal surge. Hull breach, critical systems failing. This is Commander Talia signing off. The doors opened. The sound was soft, no grand announcement, no ceremonial drumbeat, just the whisper of metal and light. Lyria turned, ready to scald whoever dared break the sanctity of her grief, and the words died in her throat. Talia stood framed in the archway. For an instant, Lyria's mind refused to accept what her eyes saw. Her daughter's stance was rigid, her once pristine uniform scorched and patched with mismatched fabric. Silver scars traced delicate lines across her azure skin, glowing faintly under the chamber's soft light. Her long ears twitched, and involuntary motion, almost uncertain as though reacquainting themselves with a home that had already buried her. But it was her eyes that shattered the Queen's breath. They were Talia's eyes, but older, heavier. Eyes that had seen worlds burn and lived to tell the tale. And beside her, because the universe thrived on imperfection, stood a human. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his battered flight jacket a collage of mismatched patches and grime. His hair was a mess of unruly brown curls, his grin crooked and infuriatingly casual, as though crashing into a sovereign sanctum was an everyday occurrence. In one hand, he held what appeared to be the remnants of a protein bar. He raised it slightly, almost like a toast. "Hi," he said, his voice carrying a drawl that made 3 armed guards tense immediately. "I saved your daughter, kind of." The silence fractured. Weapons hummed as royal guards shifted in unison, chrome-plated rifles snapping into ready positions. The chamber vibrated with lethal intent, the air tasting of ozone as energy cells. Powered up, Lyria's heartbeat roared in her ears, her controls splintering like glass as 1,000 unspoken questions fought for escape. Who was this man? How was her daughter alive? What happened out there? "Stand down." Talia's voice cut through the chaos, sharper than any blade. She moved with sudden, commanding grace, stepping between the human and a half-circle of armed soldiers. Her body angled like a shield, her chin lifted in defiance as her gaze swept over the startled guard captain. "He's with me," she said, every word like iron wrapped in silk. "Hurt him." She leaned forward, the faint glow of bioluminescent markings rippling across her skin like living fire. "And you'll answer to me." For the first time in 7 years, the Queen felt something stronger than grief-raw. Breathless disbelief, just as the hologram flickered one last time, whispering a farewell that no longer held meaning, because the ghost had come home and brought a storm with her. Asterisk Wren wasn't looking for a princess. He was looking for scrap. The moon was dead, a jagged sphere of rock orbiting a gas giant like a forgotten wound in space. Its surface was a graveyard of rusted mining rigs and shattered habitats, each structure leaning under the weight of time and neglect. The storms never stopped here. Thin, metallic dust scoured the barren plains, riding winds that howled through broken gantries like the ghosts of laborers who had long since fled. Somewhere beneath the surface, geothermal reactors still pulsed weakly, a dying heartbeat in a hollow world. Wren hated it already. His patched-together ship, the Lucky Break, sat awkwardly in a crater, hull panels rattling every time a gust hit. Inside, the smell of overheated wiring and stale rations clung like an old debt. He checked his scanner again. Its screen flickered with static, the signal unstable, but their dot and energy spike. Unregistered. Could be a battery cache. Could be a reactor core. Could be something worth enough credits to clear his name from 3 bounty boards. He adjusted the strap of his pulse rifle and descended into the storm. The old mining complex loomed like the skeleton of a titan, all twisted metal and hollow shafts plunging into darkness. His boots crunched on shattered glass panels. Every step stirred echoes that traveled deep into the tunnels below. The beam from his helmet lamp cut a thin path through dust and shadow, catching glimpses of corroded warning signs and graffiti left by workers long gone. The signal grew stronger. He reached a collapsed chamber, its ceiling half-caved under the weight of forgotten machinery. There, half buried in rubble and scorched debris, was a ship, sleek, alien. Wrong. Wren froze. The hull shimmered faintly, catching his lamp in fractured patterns of blue and silver. Symbols etched along the side glowed like dying embers. Whatever this craft was, it didn't belong to miners. And it sure as hell wasn't human. Wren's pulse quickened. Jackpot. He climbed closer, boots slipping on loose gravel, and crouched at the edge of a jagged tier in the hull. The interior was a ruin burned-out panels, shattered glass, wires dangling like entrails. And in the center, surrounded by emergency lights that flickered in stubborn defiance, lay a figure. Wren's breath caught. She was sprawled against a console, pale blue skin slick with blood that shimmered faintly under the failing lights. Her hair, once black and smooth, clung in tangled strands across a face too still. A ceremonial blade lay at her side, its edge catching what little light remained. Wren didn't move for a heartbeat. 2. Then instinct took over. He knelt beside her, fingers pressing against her neck. There it was, a pulse, faint but steady, like a distant drum. Relief surged sharp and unexpected through his chest. "Well," he muttered, staring down at the alien woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a dream or a warning. "This is either a rescue or the beginning of a very complicated hostage situation." The ship groaned, a deep metallic moan that sent dust spiraling from the ceiling. Wren swore under his breath and unhooked a med pack from his belt. Whatever war she'd come from, whatever story her scars told, she was alive for now. And he couldn't leave her here. It took hours to stabilize her. He patched burns, sealed wounds with synth gel, even improvised a splint from a broken conduit. The med pack wasn't built for alien physiology. Every injection was a gamble, every dose a guess. He kept talking anyway, half to keep her tethered, half to silence the echoes pressing in from the dark. When her eyes finally opened, they weren't the soft hue of someone safe in a palace. They were hard, glacial, sharp enough to cut. She stared at him like a predator assessing prey. "You're welcome," Ren said, offering what might have been a smile. "Though if you've got a ceremonial thank you dance or something, maybe save it. My legs are killing me." Her voice was low, rasping, but laced with steel. "Who are you?" "Ren Calder," he said. "Freelancer, professional bad decision-maker. And apparently your new best friend." She tried to sit up, failed, and glared at him like that was his fault. "Where am I?" "Somewhere between nowhere and less than nowhere." He adjusted her makeshift bandage. "Your ship's toast. Crash put a crater big enough to see from. Orbit." Her eyes flickered pain, memory, calculation. "My squadron didn't make it," Ren said quietly. "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush them both. For a moment, he thought she'd break. Instead, her jaw tightened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of command. "Help me stand." Ren blinked. "You've got half your blood on the floor, and you want to help me," she snapped, every syllable edged like a blade. And something in her tone, something that spoke of authority, of survival, made him obey that as he steadied her. Fingers brushed the hilt of that strange blade. Ren noticed then the insignia etched into her torn uniform. He didn't recognize it, but the craftsmanship, the ornamentation, it wasn't military standard, it was royal. "Great," Ren muttered under his breath. "I didn't just find an alien. I found a princess." She turned those cold eyes on him, unflinching. "If you value your life," she said, voice sharp despite exhaustion, "you will forget you ever spoke those words." Ren grinned, despite the storm rattling the walls and the distant howl of machines gone mad in the tunnels below. "Sure, Your Highness," he said. "Your secret's safe with me." Outside, the wind screamed like a warning. Neither of them listened. The palace was a labyrinth of crystal and light, but Ren had no time to appreciate the architecture. He was too busy wondering which reflective surface would be the last thing he saw before some armored aliens skewered him. They hadn't even made it past the grand atrium before the stairs started. Dozens of eyes, some glowing, some multifaceted, some arranged in patterns that made Ren profoundly uncomfortable, tracked his every move as he followed Talia through the towering gates. His boots echoed against the immaculate floor, a sound so out of place it might as well have been blaring alarms. "Welcome home, Princess," Ren thought dryly, glancing sideways at her. She walked as though she owned the place, which technically she did. But the Talia he'd known on the mining moon, the one who swore at malfunctioning heat regulators and patched hulls with her bare hands, was gone. In her place was someone colder, sharper, dressed in freshly tailored formal armor that shimmered like liquid silver. Her scars remained, faint blue lines tracing delicate patterns along her skin. But here in this glittering hall, they looked less like wounds and more like war paint. Ren wasn't sure if he liked it. "Keep your head down," Talia murmured without turning. "Funny," he muttered back. "That's the same advice I gave you when the ceiling collapsed on us." "Didn't take then either." One of the guards twitched, just a little, but enough for Ren to notice. Great. His sarcasm probably translated to something obscene in at least 3 languages. The assembly hall loomed ahead, its vaulted ceiling alive with constellations projected in threads of gold and sapphire light. Voices murmured in countless tongues, sharp as blades beneath the polished civility. At the far end, Queen Lyria sat upon a throne grown from crystalline veins, every facet glowing faintly like a heart of frozen stars. Her gaze swept the chamber like a tidal surge, and when it landed on Talia, the entire hall fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the Queen rose. Ren had expected anger, maybe disbelief. What he hadn't expected was the raw sound that tore from her throat, halfway between a laugh and a sob, as she crossed the distance and gathered her daughter into an embrace that shattered every notion of royal decorum. The Queen, who had once silenced generals with a glance, now clung to Talia like a drowning woman to driftwood. Ren looked away, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. He shifted awkwardly, hands buried in the pockets of his battered jacket, until the soft click of weapons pulled him back to reality. 6 guards, all aiming at him. Really? He said, raising his hands slowly. This is the thank you I get for saving your princess? Tough crowd. Silence, human, one snarled, their voice distorted by the modulation field in their helmet. Ren opened his mouth to argue, because if he didn't, he might explode from sheer stubbornness. But Talia's voice cut through the tension like a blade drawn in the dark. He's with me. Every head turned as she stepped away from her mother, placing herself squarely between Ren and the rifles now thrumming with lethal charge. Her voice was calm, but it carried an edge that vibrated in the bones, honed by command and necessity. Hurt him, she said, slow and deliberate, and you'll answer to me. The guards hesitated. The silence stretched taut as a tripwire. Ren let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and tried for a grin. Just for the record, he muttered, this is the 2nd time this week someone threatened to kill me before breakfast. I'm starting to think I have a type. One of the nobles, a being with translucent skin and a voice like grinding glass, let out an audible hiss. Around the hall, whispers rippled like cracks spreading through ice. The Queen straightened, composure sliding back over her like armor. But her hands still trembled when she turned to face her court. Summon the council, she commanded, her melodic tones thrumming with steel. The princess' lives and her return changes everything. Ren's grin faltered at that last part, because for the first time since they'd left the mining moon, he realized just how right she was. The galaxy didn't just think Talia was dead. It had built an entire future on that assumption. And now? Now the future was bleeding out on the palace floor, one secret at a time. Asterisk, a sharp chime echoed through the chamber, a council summons. Behind Ren, the doors sealed with a hiss, locking him inside a hall filled with people who clearly thought his species had no business standing on royal ground. And somewhere above, in the unseen rafters, a drone's optical sensor glowed crimson. Before vanishing into the shadows, asterisk, the floating city of Elysium Prime glittered like a crown suspended above a storm. Ren pressed his face to the viewport of the royal transport, trying to ignore the uneasy weight in his gut as the city drifted over an ocean of liquid metals that shimmered in hues of copper and violet. Lightning webbed across the gas giant far. Below, each strike big enough to vaporize a small station. Beautiful, he said finally, because silence made him nervous and nervous made him talk. In a catastrophic, physics shouldn't allow this kind of way. Talia didn't answer. She was seated opposite him, armored in ceremonial silver and blue that glowed faintly under the cabin lights. The plating curved close to her body, elegant, yet functional, and the thin shimmer of a personal shield traced her silhouette like a ghost. Her expression was carved from stone, no sign of the woman who once cursed broken heat vents or laughed at Ren's terrible jokes in the dark. He hated it. Hated this mask they'd forced back on her. You don't have to do this, Ren said, quietly. If you want to turn this ship around. No, she cut him off, her voice sharp but trembling beneath the edge. I spent years hiding in shadows. Let them see me. Let them choke on it. Ren leaned back, muttering, great, Nothing ever goes wrong at heavily publicized galactic peace festivals. The docking clamps engaged with a hiss. The doors slid open, and Wren stepped into a fever dream of opulence. The festival stretched across a series of concentric platforms spiraling around the city's central spire. Dancers from 7 worlds twirled in antigrav ribbons of light. Choirs sang harmonics that made the air itself shimmer. Towers rose like glass spears, projecting holograms of interlocking species emblem symbols of unity, of peace. The kind of peace, Wren thought grimly, that needed 1,000 guards and a planetary defense grid to survive the night. Cameras hovered everywhere, lenses glinting like predatory eyes. Billions would be watching across the stars as Talia, dead princess, living myth, took the stage. Wren adjusted the stiff formal jacket they'd shoved him into and muttered under his breath, "If this thing strangles me, I'm haunting someone." Didn't laugh. She barely looked at him as attendants adjusted the sweep of her cloak, polished her gauntlets, and murmured prayers in an ancient dialect. When she finally turned, her eyes caught his, and for a heartbeat, the steel cracked. He saw the fear there, raw and unhidden. "You're not alone," he said softly. Then the fanfare began. The platform rose in a blaze of light, lifting Talia into the center of a panoramic stage overlooking a sea of envoys and dignitaries. The roar of applause hit like a physical force. Wren stayed at the perimeter, wedged between 2 guards who looked like they'd eat him if protocol allowed. He scanned the crowd, instincts prickling. Something felt wrong. Talia stepped forward, chin high, voice steady as it carried across the plaza. 7 years ago, I fell into silence. Tonight I speak for... The stage exploded, not completely, just enough to send shockwaves through the platform, hurling dancers and envoys into the air. Smoke billowed, thick and acrid, as alarms shrieked and the sky filled with the crackle of energy barriers slamming into place. Wren was already moving, shoving through the chaos, heart pounding. "Talia!" Through the haze, he saw her shield flickering, armor scorched but alive. She pivoted toward him, then froze. A figure dropped. From above, shrouded in distortion fields that shattered as it landed in a crouch. Armor gleamed with stealth alloys, reflecting light in dizzying patterns. A blade extended with a whisper of death. Not toward Talia, toward the Queen, standing vulnerable at the dais. Wren didn't think. He launched himself forward, slamming into a hovering drone mid-flight, because his brain screamed threat before his eyes confirmed it. The drone detonated in a harmless burst of confetti, showering him in glitter and tiny holographic peace symbols. False alarm. He yelled, choking. On smoke. Just a very aggressive party trick. Oh hell. Because the real danger was already moving. Asterisk. Talia intercepted the assassin like a thunderclap, her gauntlet flaring with a kinetic blast that hurled the attacker sideways into a marble pillar. The impact cracked stone, but the assassin rolled, fluid and lethal, helmet snapping back to reveal a face Wren recognized from her nightmares. Darren Vex. His smile was blood and venom as he straightened, voice carrying over the chaos. "You should have stayed dead, princess." It was a better ending to the story. The plaza erupted into pandemonium as guards surged, energy weapons blazing. Wren grabbed a fallen shock baton and planted himself at Talia's side, because whatever this was, it was only the beginning. And deep above the shimmering city, more. Cloaked signatures bloomed on Wren's wrist, scanner dozens of them. Closing fast. Asterisk. The air in the royal palace tasted of ozone and fear. Hours after the Unity Festival erupted into chaos, the grand halls once filled with diplomats and dignitaries, now bristled with security teams and sealed checkpoints. Guards in chrome and silver armor patrolled every archway, their weapons humming like restless predators. Holoscreens projected urgent headlines across the walls, each one echoing the same impossible truth. Princess Talia alive. Unity Summit attacked. Ren sat slouched in a chair outside the council chamber, nursing a split lip and glaring at a drone hovering just above his head. It hummed softly as it scanned him for the 5th time. "For the record," he muttered, "if this thing tries to take a blood sample, I'm filing a complaint." The drone chirped as if in mockery, then floated away. Ren exhaled and let his head drop back against the wall. He still smelled faintly of smoke and burnt circuitry from the festival, glitter clinging stubbornly to his jacket, like some kind of cosmic joke. The memory of the explosion replayed in his head, Talia's shield flickering in the smoke, her face hard and cold as she fought the man who had once been her brother in arms. Darren Vex. Ren didn't know him before tonight, but he knew the type. Rigid jaw, eyes full of conviction. The kind of soldier who carved loyalty into stone and shattered everything that didn't fit his vision. Ren had seen it before, in humans and aliens alike. People like Darren weren't born, they were forged, sharpened into blades by war and politics. And now that blade had turned inward, the council chamber doors hissed open. Ren sat up, expecting Talia, but instead, 2 guards strode out and stopped in front of him. "The council will see you now," one intoned, voice modulated into something. That sounded like a growl. "Oh, good," Ren said dryly, pushing to his feet. "I was starting to miss being yelled at by people who could vaporize me with a gesture." Inside, the chamber pulsed with restrained fury. It was a cathedral of light and shadow, with crystalline walls that rippled faintly as if alive. Around a vast oval table sat the most powerful beings in 7 systems. Towering insectoids, beings of living crystal, serpentine envoys coiled in liquid tanks, and the Atorian queen at the head silent, her face carved in perfect control. Talia, standing in the center like a storm-given flesh. Her armor was scorched, her hair tangled, but her posture was unyielding. The scars that marked her blue skin caught the chamber's glow like threads of silver fire. She looked at Ren as he entered, not with warmth, not yet, but with something he couldn't name. Relief, maybe, or the shared knowledge that they were both walking into a lion's den. "This is him," said a voice like splintering glass, the crystalline envoy from Meaner, the human, the scavenger who brought her here. Ren gave a small bow, more mocking than respectful. Ren Calder, freelancer, occasional lifesaver. Big fan of not being incinerated, so let's keep this civil. The envoy's facets shifted in agitation. This festival was broadcast across the spiral. Billions saw a princess long thought dead return, only to be attacked by her own kind. "Do you comprehend the chaos this will cause?" "Yeah," Ren said, folding his arms. "Better than you think." Another voice low serpentined through the air. "How do we know she speaks truth? That she has not been compromised?" Talia's jaw tightened. "Compromised? I bled for this alliance. I buried friends on worlds you can't pronounce. And while I fought to keep your borders intact, you sat in these halls rewriting history to make my death convenient." The chamber thrummed as her words hit, a resonance that rippled through the crystalline walls. Ren saw it in their faces, or whatever passed for faces shock, and discomfort twisting like shadows in light. "You think I care about your comfort?" Talia continued, her voice rising like a blade unsheathed. "About preserving a lie because it suits your politics? I survived when I wasn't meant to. That's not betrayal. That's proof your system is broken." Queen Lyria's fingers curled against the armrest of her throne, the only sign of tension in her sculpted composure. Her gaze shifted to Ren. "And you? Why are you here, human?" Ren hesitated, then shrugged. "Because someone had to keep her alive when the galaxy wrote her off. Someone had to stand between her and the things that wanted her dead. He leaned forward slightly, his grin sharp enough to draw blood. And guess what? Those things weren't always strangers. The silence that followed was colder than space. Finally, the crystalline envoy spoke, each word cutting like broken glass. Your presence destabilizes an already fragile balance. If the council had sense, they would remove you permanently. Ren smiled without warmth. Get in line. Before anyone could respond, the chamber lights pulsed crimson. An alarm keened, slicing through the air like a blade. Security breach, intoned the AI voice. Containment failure in detention block. Ren's stomach dropped. He didn't need a translation to know what that meant. Baron Vex was gone. And he wouldn't be running without a reason. Talia's gaze snapped to Ren, her voice low and lethal. He's not fleeing. He's moving. Ren tightened his grip on the shock baton still clipped to his belt, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. Guess that means so are we. The galaxy didn't explode overnight. It cracked slowly, invisibly, until the fractures became impossible to ignore. Within hours of the Unity Festival attack, encrypted transmissions rippled across the spiral like shockwaves. Border systems recalled ambassadors. Fleets shifted from ceremonial patrols to combat formations. Words like secession, loyalty tests, and containment protocols leaked through private channels, whispered in the halls of Power and in the palace. At Atoria, Talia made her choice. She stood in what had once been her private study. The word felt almost obscene now. The chamber glowed with the soft bioluminescence of living crystal walls. Shelves still lined with relics of a childhood she barely recognized. A fractured star map, a ceremonial dagger, a holover, and her mother laughing in a garden that might as well belong to another lifetime. Ren was sprawled on a low couch, boots propped on a polished table that had probably witnessed centuries of diplomacy. He was tinkering with something that looked suspiciously like a drone sensory core, muttering to himself. You're going to blow up the palace, Talia said without looking at him. Correction, Ren replied, not glancing up. Going to make sure the next assassin doesn't get within 50 meters without tripping enough. Alarms to wake your entire security division. You rewired the palace AI to play music if someone breaches the perimeter. Ren grinned. Celebratory music. You know, for morale. Talia almost smiled, and that almost scared her more than anything, because smiling felt like betrayal. Not to Ren, but to the ghosts that trailed her like shadows. Her squadron, her fallen comrades, the part of herself that still whispered that surviving when they hadn't was wrong. She dragged her gaze back to the holoscreen hovering in front of her, its surface alive with data threads and star maps. Transmission logs, council directives, intelligence reports, pieces of a galaxy breaking apart. Ren noticed the silence and leaned forward, his voice softer now. What's the play, Princess? She didn't correct him this time. They want control, she said finally. The council, the factions. They see me as a symbol they can parade or erase. Either way, I'm a tool. A piece on their board. Ren tilted his head. And you're done playing? Talia looked up, the glow from the screen etching sharp lines across her face. I'm done pretending the board isn't rigged. The decision crystallized in that. Moment swift, cold, inevitable. She wasn't here to reclaim the throne. She wasn't here to bend back into a system that had let the galaxy bleed. While hiding behind ceremony and law. She was here to burn that system down and build something. Stronger from the ashes. Her hand moved across the interface, fingers dancing over glowing runes. Transmissions leapt across the network-coded messages, sent through dark channels to people who still remembered what loyalty really meant. Honest governors, outworld militias, refugee leaders abandoned by the core systems, scientists buried under bureaucratic rot. Soldiers without a war who still believed in something worth bleeding for. One phrase anchored every message, pulsing like a heartbeat in the data stream. Phoenix Accord.Ren watched it spread, a crooked smile tugging at his mouth. Nice branding, he said. Has that whole rise from the ashes vibe? Very dramatic. Talia didn't smile. It has to be. Because this wasn't just politics anymore. It was survival of ideals, of people, of a galaxy sliding toward the same darkness she'd spent 7 years clawing her way out of. The first responses came within hours. A colony on the edge of the Veil Nebula pledging ships. A Sindari scientist offering prototype tech in exchange for sanctuary. Even whispers from within the Atorian military fractured loyalties seeking. Purpose. It wasn't an army yet. It wasn't even a plan. But it was a spark. And sometimes sparks were enough to ignite stars. Ren pushed himself up and joined her at the console, his reflection ghosting beside hers in the shimmering display. So, he said lightly, because his voice was always lighter when the weight threatened to crush them both. How long before someone tries to kill you for this? They already have, Talia murmured, scrolling through another incoming pledge. 3 times. You stopped 2. Ren's brow furrowed. Wait 2? What about the 3rd? Talia gave him a level look. The breakfast drone yesterday. Ren's jaw dropped. That thing was armed? It was disguised as a beverage server. And yes, Ren groaned, running a hand over his face. This galaxy has issues. You're still here, Talia said quietly. Ren met her gaze, and for once didn't deflect with a joke. Yeah, I'm still here. Before the moment could stretch into something they couldn't name, the room lights pulsed crimson. A security alert flared across the wall, a breach in the outer docks. Talia's fingers clenched against the console. He's making his move, she said. Ren grabbed his jacket and a pulse rifle from the rack near the door. Darren? Talia nodded once, her expression carved from steel. He's not trying to escape. He's trying to cripple the Phoenix before it takes flight. Ren checked the rifle's charge and grinned, a grin that never reached his eyes. Then let's make sure he chokes on his own fire. Asterisk, the sky above Atoria burned with streaks of fire. Not from sunsets or ceremonial flares, but from warships tearing through the upper atmosphere in arcs of plasma and smoke. The palace trembled as another explosion rippled through the outer rings of the defense grid. Fragments of shattered drones rained, like molten hail into the oceans below. Ren slammed into the bulkhead as the blast shockwave rattled the corridor. So, he yelled over the alarms, gripping his pulse rifle. When you said this wouldn't be easy, you really undersold it. Talia didn't look back. Her boots pounded against the crystal floor, her silver armor flickering with energy surges as she sprinted toward the docking bays. The patterns glowing beneath her skin pulsed like lightning veins. Alive with battle fury. Darren's overriding the planetary shields, she snapped. If he gains control of the central nexus, the Council fleets will move in. They'll call it containment, but it's extermination. Yeah, because nothing says peace like orbital bombardment, Ren muttered, vaulting over a fallen guard drone. His knuckles were white on the rifle grip, but his grin was feral. So what's the plan, Princess? Talia glanced over her shoulder, eyes blazing in the crimson emergency glow. The plan, she said, is to stop him whatever it takes. The docking bay doors groaned open, like the jaws of some ancient beast. Beyond them, chaos reigned. Fires guttered along the edges of the hangar where security mechs lay gutted and smoking. Sleek black corvettes, Darren's strike ships, curved like predatory knives against the azure sky, their engines roaring with stolen power. And in the eye, center of it all, stood Darren Vex. His armor was obsidian, etched with the sigils of a forgotten legion, plates refracting light in jagged shards. His face was bare now, blood streaking one temple, his expression carved from fury and righteousness. In his hand, a blade shimmered with phase energy, humming like a predator's growl. "Talia," he called across the gulf of fire and ruin. His voice carried through the smoke, deep and resonant, amplified by the docking bay acoustics. "You should have stayed a ghost. The galaxy doesn't need you." "No," she answered, her voice sharp as shrapnel. "It doesn't need you." Then she moved fast as a flare, bursting in vacuum. The clash was blinding. Steel screamed against. Steel as their blades collided, sparks spraying in arcs of violet and gold. The force of the impact sent shockwaves rippling through the bay, rattling debris across the deck. Ren dove behind a fallen crate as energy bolts screamed overhead. He popped up, firing controlled bursts at the Corvette engines, aiming to cripple, rather than destroy. One ship spiraled, belching fire as it slammed into a supply tower. The blast hurled Ren backward, slamming him against the floor. Pain ripped through his shoulder, but he rolled, came up swinging. "Talia!" he shouted, just as Darren wrenched her blade free and slammed her back against a bulkhead, phase knife slashing toward her throat. Ren didn't think. He moved, sprinting through a storm of gunfire. He launched himself at Darren with a snarl, tackling him in a blur of metal and blood. They hit the deck hard, weapons skittering away in opposite directions. Darren roared, fists like hammers as they crashed against Ren's ribs. Ren gritted his teeth and drove a knee into Darren's gut, slamming his head back against the floor with a sickening crack. For one breath, one impossible heartbeat, he thought he'd won, and Darren surged up with the strength of a beast, seizing Ren by the throat and hauling him into the air. His fingers were iron, crushing, his voice venom against Ren's ear. "You think you matter, human? You're a footnote in someone else's war." Ren spat blood into his face and grinned. "Funny, you sound scared for a guy winning." And then Talia was there. Out she hit Darren like a meteor, her blade arcing in a sweep of silver fire. The strike sheared through his gauntlet, severing the grip on Ren's throat. Darren staggered, bellowing in rage, then lunged again, blade whistling. Toward her heart, Talia caught his wrist mid-swing. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, she saw the zeal that had burned everything human out of him. "You wanted a martyr," she said, voice like frost. "You got a reckoning." The blade turned, fast, precise, a single motion honed by years of survival. Darren fell without a sound. His blood pooled black against the silver floor, spreading like ink across a page. For a long moment, the bay was silent, but for the hiss of flames and the crackle of dying circuits. Then Talia turned to Ren, her chest heaving, her scars glowing like constellations in the smoke. "You alive?" she asked, voice ragged. Ren coughed, wiping blood from his mouth, with a grin that was equal parts exhaustion and triumph. "Define." "Alive. But yeah, close enough." Outside, the corvettes were breaking formation, their cloaks shimmering as they powered down and fled into the void. The council fleets hesitated, their commands fractured by the broadcast, now spilling across every frequency. A live feed of Talia standing amid the wreckage, alive and unbroken, declaring the Phoenix Accord. Her words burned into the stars. "Old order is dead. From its ashes, something stronger will rise, not for power, not for crowns. For the living, for every world left behind while you played politics in glass towers. You wanted silence. You wanted ghosts. Instead, you've got fire." Hours later, the palace lay quiet, save for the hum of rebuilding systems and the distant murmur of tired soldiers. Talia stood on the balcony of her private wing, watching the twin suns bleed orange into the horizon. The city below shimmered with lights, fragile and defiant, like sparks against the dark. Ren stepped up beside her, still bandaged, still grinning that reckless grin that had carried him through every impossible hour. "So," he said, resting his elbows on the railing, "what now? You've pissed off half the galaxy, declared a rebellion, and nearly got both of us killed. Again." Talia didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on the horizon, where the stars were beginning to pierce the dusk like diamonds against velvet. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but unbreakable. "Now," she said, "we go where they need us." Wren arched a brow. "That's pretty vague. Care to elaborate?" She turned, and for the first time since the mining moon, he saw her smile fierce and bright and real. "Anywhere," she said. "Anywhere that needs a little hope." Wren chuckled, pushing away from the railing as the upgraded Lucky Break purred to life on the platform behind them. "Then buckle up, Princess. Sounds like a long trip." And together, silhouetted against the blaze of dawn, they walked toward the ship that would carry them into the fire, into the dark, and if the stars were kind, into a future worth fighting. For Dot, the hangar doors yawned open. Engines roared like thunder, and the Lucky Break vanished into the sea of stars. * The end.